All right, thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Bill.
Whatever you're thinking, get over it. Um, and we'll move on from here. We never look back. I'm sure there's an explanation for what happened, but a few announcements. I don't know if we have guests. I'm sure we have guests trying to get in, but they don't have good information, so we won't have any guests in this meeting. However, earlier today, Kelvin Jones emailed me and said he intended to join the meeting, but he has to be at the governor's press conference this afternoon. But he intends to join Rotary. So that's some good news.
That's great.
Good.
And some other good news, and this will be a surprise for her, is Regina is our latest Paul Harris Fellow.
Oh,
Hey.
wonderful.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Regina. This is an awkward way of doing it, but when we have our first face-to-face, I will get to put your pin on.
Mhm.
Ooh,
If
neat.
you let me. And
Lovely.
and congratulate you again. But we are so happy. You are probably a Paul Harris Fellow in record time. Most of us who contribute $25 a quarter to the foundation take forever to become a Paul Harris Fellow, but Regina really tripled up at on Giving Tuesday and went over the hurdle in record time. So congratulations, Regina. While we're on the subject, this is the last month that we have an opportunity to ensure we're an E-Ray, every Rotarian, every year club. And if you're not at that point just yet, I would ask you to make every effort to get that up to $100 or more. And Paul has a list of those who aren't there. So if you're not sure, just give Paul a call and he will let you know. And I know you'll do the right thing because we have been an E-Ray club ever since I've been in the club. So let's keep the record going. Some more good news, some additional good news. I try to keep up with Katie Nunez, but she doesn't always respond, and I can understand why. So I try not to be too pushy, but she got back to me and she said that she and Mark are doing well, that Mark is coming along with the treatment that was started last summer. So I think we're all happy to know that Mark Nunez is coming along. Some of you don't know Katie, but Katie was a member of our club before she had to resign because of Mark's illness primarily. So, but we treat her just as if she's still a member. She comes and she helps to make crab cakes. So keep Katie in your prayers. Paul, give us the latest on how Ginger's doing.
Ginger's doing great. She's out, she takes walks every day, and she's out working in the yard. And she still a little sensitive in her stomach area, but you know, she's doing very well.
Well, you send her.
She went speeding by us on the golf cart yesterday, so I guess she's doing okay.
That's right.
Well, the club sends her our love, and will you pass
Thank
that
you.
on for us?
Will
So,
do.
Randy, we can't see you, but I'm sure you're looking great. Give us an update on how you're doing.
I'm looking fantastic. That's why you can't see me.
Uh-huh.
but I am doing well. Thank you.
That's good. Well, you just keep doing better and better. Um, Anybody in the membership have anything they need to tell us for their own good?
Hey,
or for the
Bill,
cl- Yes.
if I could take the liberty here, I do a daily devotion. Sometimes they really seem to be on point for what we do. And I've been kind of holding this back with Regina, though, doing the Paul Harris thing. If you don't mind, I'll read like just a short piece of scripture. And I think when I read it, you'll understand why it makes sense. Is that okay?
Absolutely, John.
Okay, this is from Paul's letter to the Philippians, 2nd chapter, starting in verse 1. And it says, "Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and one purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. Do not look only to your own interest, but take interest in others too." And I thought about that with all we're trying to do, with the shore delivery and just whatever it is, and the money we've gathered up and sent places. That's what we're trying to do. Maybe not as well as we ought to do, but it hit me that it was very much apropos for what we're working on now and what the Rotary does in general. So anyway, that's it.
John, you are spot on.
Right on.
I don't think we can agree with you more, and we thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Mary is on. Kind of. We see Mary's name. We don't see Mary, but and we hear Mary too.
I hear you.
That's good
Mary, why can't we see you?
because I had to travel to North Carolina yesterday, and so I'm not at my house.
That's a
Yeah.
good reason. That's a good reason. Okay, well, you're well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Paul mentioned that, not Paul, but John mentioned, that we recently done a lot to help food projects on the Eastern Shore. And you may remember that a few weeks ago, we mentioned that Bay Creek or Preserve Communities, the new owners of Bay Creek, had extended a challenge, a matching grant kind of thing, which is up to $10,000 now in support of the food bank. And we, the board decided that we would give $1,000 to that with their match. That is $2,000 for the Eastern Shore Food Bank. And we have now given $7,000 as a club to food specific projects. So
Great.
we ought to be proud of ourselves, and hopefully we're making a difference.
Yes,
So
we
Bill,
are.
can I just say something?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Of course I have not been in Rotary meetings probably for at least 3 weeks. And that really is as a direct result of work. We've gotten a lot more calls, sexual assault, domestic violence. But I wanted to just take the time, which is why I kind of made some time to hop on this morning, was just to say thank you to the club. I know that you guys made a donation to Escative, and I just wanted to say thank you and how much we really appreciate you guys.
Well,
Thank you.
I don't know about the rest of you, but Paul and I have a special place in our hearts for the Eastern Shore Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The organization, some of you weren't on board then, was one of our joint grants a few years ago. And Paul and I, you know the slats that are in the fence behind the shelter?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I do.
Paul installed every one of those.
Yeah, well, Bill and I went up there one day and worked on it. Right.
But that's one of our favorite projects, and they always will be. Now look who showed up.
Randy.
Hey, Randy.
Randy, do you know what the problem was?
Even a blind squirrel. No, I don't know what the problem was. I just kept trying and finally it seemed to work. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to see you. You do look great. And Randy, you don't have to wear that hat. There
Keep the
are
glare off of the camera.
there are a number of members, one right above you, one to the right of you, one up there in the top in the middle, who have somehow lost their hair. All right, now here's the, this is where I have to ask you to do things. What do we need in our succession strategy, my friends?
What do you mean?
Need a president-elect.
Oh,
Yeah, well, next month we will. Right now, we need a nominee.
President nominee. That's what I should have said.
well, hey, listen, Tina's off the screen. Let's elect Tina.
Ha!
Okay, when she comes back, we'll announce. We'll give her the good news.
There you go.
Meanwhile, one of the things the president nominee / elect does is identify speakers. And since that role has been, hey, Mary,
Mhm.
you want to go
Yeah.
back and do that?
You what? Invite speakers?
Yeah, now that you're kind of going to stick around.
I don't
Would you
mind
still
it.
be, would you still be interested in Robert Woodson?
What?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been meaning to call you on that.
Okay, you sure you want, okay.
Yeah, so let me get to you because I've got a few lined up and I don't want to double book.
I
So
don't
I'll-
think he's in this weekend, but I can get a hold of him.
Okay, so we'll,
He said he would do it. He said he'd be honored.
oh, and we're honored to have him. He tells a good story. He's,
Yeah.
we're talking about Robert Woodson, who is a MacArthur Fellow.
And a neighbor.
And a neighbor, yes. So we've got coming up next week, Kenny Janes. You all know Kenny. Kenny is going to help you out, Stanley.
Oh, how's that?
He's our membership chair, district membership chair, and
Oh.
he's going to be our speaker next week. And then we've got Jeff Holland lined up
Terrific.
later down the road. So things are working. We also need a cleanup czar. Cleanup czar. Okay.
I just about died last time I was out there doing that. I don't know if I'd be good for that.
Well,
That is hard work.
it is. It is.
Did anyone talk to Dennis and what's going on with him?
Yeah, Dennis
Yeah.
is alive and well. He's been really caught up in his house or his two houses, and he's probably out there trying to figure out the code. So Dennis is okay. Who called a buddy last week?
I did.
Okay. You know, we can't see your hand, so if you can cross your fingers and say yes.
I called a buddy about an hour ago, Bill.
All right.
You.
Yeah, that's
told you to
right.
get in.
Yeah, yeah. Rub it in, Reggie. Rub it in. Twist the knife. It's bad enough that I feel badly. Next week. Next week is board meeting week. So those of you who are board members and chairs, you're pre-warned, but I'll send out some information. Okay, who invited a friend or a neighbor? Okay, that's important. We can't always get them, but we have to invite them. So everybody is, oh, you know who we're missing? Bill Murphy. Who wants to call Murphy?
Tried to get in, but he couldn't. I talked to him, and he and I were having the same problem. I'm about to send him. I finally got in after keeping trying. I think I was locked out for a while, but I'm going to send him a text now.
Okay.
Let me see if anybody. I turned off the waiting room.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't need that on top of. Okay, there's nobody. You know, the system's acting funny today. Usually the waiting room will pop up on the side there.
Well, it's different for every time I go in, it's a little different procedure or something, because I do Zooms with other people too, and it's very confusing sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think you have to.
Let's blame it on Zoom. You know, in spite of all these problems, we've got 19 people on.
I'm thinking what might have happened, a lot of applications will only give you like 3 tries at a password.
Right.
Now for a short
We had
period.
trouble getting logged on.
Yeah.
It must be pretty busy.
Sorry, maybe we can try again some other time.
Okay, well, the reason Bill Murphy came to mind is the KIP Elementary School that we helped sponsor along with other organizations. It will continue to have their Student of the Year award, and Bill's been in contact with them, and Paul said we have enough money in the bank that we can continue to support that. And it's not much money. It's a plaque and a few dollars. So we're continuing to do that. So Rotary goes on, even with the pandemic. We're doing okay. So Diane, what are you gonna do?
Yes.
What are you gonna do right now?
All right.
Happy dollars.
Happy dollars.
And I'll just tell you, with all that's going on in the world, I'm just happy that I'm here today. I'm happy that Rotary is kind of a refuge where we can go for 1 hour and not watch the silly things on television, and know that there are friends that are different from us, but they're friends, good buddies. So something to be happy about. So I'm going to be happy to the tune of $1.
Well, I'm going to throw another dollar. I'll throw another dollar into that, Bill, simply because I'm happy to be able to share a little about my life story today.
And I'm happy you are, Alan.
And I'm happy. I have a happy daughter. I'm happy. Actually, I have 2 happy daughters. I'm happy that Bill is here with us, and also I'm happy that I really like and agree what he just said.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Look, I'm not gonna push the happy dollar thing too much today.
Bill, before you quit, I'll jump in on a couple of things. One, I'm happy to see David Kappa's been playing with little characters putting on the screen. Nobody seems to have noticed. I've noticed. And Stanley is drinking wine for lunch. So I think we ought to go to his house once we start.
So Stan's pretty happy.
He is happy. But I'm going to put in $5. I'm also happy that I have 4 pending pieces of litigation as I try to undermine my practice, and I've settled 2 this week. So that's really, I mean, it just means they've ended. Doesn't mean things are really happy. People usually unhappy when you settle, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm happy because I don't have to fool with them anymore. So that's a good thing.
I know another reason you're happy. You're happy because ching ching, ching ching.
Well, no, not really. No, not really. I mean, when it settles, it just means everybody quits, and that's a good thing.
No, okay, John. And you know, John, I can't help it.
No, win is when you get the bucks, Bill. And settling, you don't get money. You just say, I quit.
How many of you think I'm too hard on John?
None.
Okay, David has a happy dollar. David, you had your.
All right, I'm good for a happy dollar. Really, guys, I was working 40 or 50 hours a week before the pandemic, and I'm going to be 70 years old in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I've got 9 grandkids to keep. Look, I was working really hard, and this pandemic has given me a whole new outlook on things. And I'm sure many of you will share this same sentiment, but it's good to express it because I've got a whole new appreciation for my time, my spare time, and what I can do with it. And I've been afraid to retire. I've been very, very, just I didn't know what I would do with myself if I gave up my job or and yet I've discovered that there is a wonderful life after work. Because frankly, I've closed that office on Mason Avenue for over 2 months now, and the real estate business is pretty sleepy right now. And so I'm really, really thrilled to have this new outlook on life. And so I'm seeing that, there's a brighter side to this, this national tragedy that we're experiencing, personally anyway. So I hope all of you are all doing well. And I think about you guys. You're right, Bill. This is a wonderful gathering. I look forward to meeting with everybody on this venue, on Tuesdays. Thank you so much. And one other thing, I'll throw in another happy dollar because I live in a very remote spot. My driveway is half a mile long.
Ooh.
And the other day, I was walking on the driveway, and here I found this kitten.
Oh wow!
Found it out of the briars and the brambles, and it had half its tail bitten off by a wild animal. It had been lost, and I found it. It found me. And darn if that kitten didn't follow me home right at my ankles. And so I've adopted this wonderful animal. And so I've got a new member in my household. Thank you. I call him Poppy. So I'm very happy to be here with you guys today and to share that experience. Thank you.
That's a great story.
David, you're all right. You got Mary crying. And I'm next. I'm a big crybaby too, so it's good to see you guys. Well,
well,
okay.
I'm glad that you could not see my face.
These are happy dollars. I have 5 happy dollars today.
Wow, Medi.
Well, I've been working on this book, an memoir of Tom Godwin. You remember him?
Oh. Yes.
So I am writing his memoir, and I'm 2/3 done. And the pandemic really has advanced the work very well because that's all I'm doing now. And and last Sunday we had our writers. There is a Eastern Shore writing group that I belong to, and so we met for face-to-face for the first time since the pandemic, and it was wonderful. And so I got to present my book, and as far as what I've done so far with that, and they gave me very good suggestions. And so I'll be editing it pretty soon, and hope to publish it very soon before the year is over anyway. Great. So the work is going well, and I'm very happy that it is well received by my writers group.
Congratulations. I didn't know you were doing that.
Well, Tom and I had been working on this since he presented his presentation at the Rotary last summer. And that's when I approached him, yeah.
That's is it going to be a hardbound book or?
Well, we'll probably publish it. Depends on the publisher, which publishing company would accept it. And by the way, if you know of any publisher, you could send the information to me, and I could explore that. I'm looking for a publisher to publish the book.
You know who might know of you is the lady who leads the writing class, Mary.
Oh yes, she's in my group. Yeah.
Yeah, she might know some.
So I'm exploring the Historical Society and the Virginia University because of the nature of the subject of the book. The book actually details growing up Black in Cape Charles during the segregation era. Wow. And there's very little information about what the experience is like on Cape Charles. And so I hope that the book will make some kind of contribution to the history of Cape Charles.
That brings to mind Frances Bibbins. Who knows Frances or knew Frances Bibbins? She died about 3 years ago, but she was a publisher and a historian, Eastern Shore person. She's looking down from heaven.
Yeah.
And
well, I am familiar with her work, and I have cited some of her work in the book too, because the book contains a lot of the other persons that were significant in the history of the Eastern Shore. And Bibbins has a lot of information. And Kirk Mariner is also another source that I have quoted a lot.
Maddie, if you haven't done so already, there are some ebook online self-editing possibilities too, where basically you self-edit and sell it yourself, and you're not paying an editor any royalties, but just something to think about and check out.
Right.
Bill,
I'll explore all of it when it's time. I'm completing the book, and maybe in 3 months I'm ready for copy editing, and I will be exploring all these avenues.
Bill?
Yes, Reggie?
Yes, I knew Frances as well. Her brother and I were classmates in high school. So yes, she is a tremendous resource and asset for the area, and the information that she researched and provided in her books.
Would somebody...
Did you go to school with George or
Paul? Paul and I were classmates.
Okay, that's great. Well, okay, he pre-announced himself, but I'll have to tell a funny story before I ask Alan to talk to us. Alan and I drove up to one of the Rotary classes up in Washington one Saturday. So if you've ever done that, you know that you're about 3 or 4 hours together with someone you kind of know, but you don't really know. You know, it's a fellow Rotarian, but I didn't know Alan before Rotary. And Alan told me his life story, and yes, and I'll tell you, I didn't want to stop driving. Alan is the most interesting guy and an unassuming guy you've ever met in the world. I was ready to drive on to New York if Alan would keep talking. Now here's the funny part. So I said, I'll get the other half on the way back. So we're driving back, and guess what Alan does for 3 to 4 hours? He sleeps. Alan went right to sleep and didn't wake up until we hit the bridge. So Alan, thanks for stepping up, and you're going to make our meeting go down on record.
Well, here's, as they say, is the rest of the story, Bill. Well, thanks a lot. Some of you know that I've gotten in my spare time now into genealogy a bit. And so before I get to my personal story, I'll just give you about 2 minutes of background that I've been finding out about my own family. And that is, first of all, on my mother's side, she comes from French, Dutch, and German background. emphasis on the German because her maiden name was Sagmüller or Sawmiller. The Segmüller family were fine machinists would do in the optical and clock making areas. I have one of the clocks are made by them and also some optical items. Segmüller was linked up for a time with Bausch and Lomb, the optical company. It used to be Bausch and Lomb and Segmüller. And toward the end of the 1800s, he left the Bausch and Lomb and on his own and continued his optical work. He designed and built the telescope at the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. And there's a plaque.
Wow.
My mother, who was raised in Rochester, where they were located, liked to tell the times when she remembered George Eastman coming up in his carriage to the house to visit with my great-grandfather. And so the optical folks got together with Kodak and Bausch and Lomb and so forth. In any event, that's a little bit about the side of my mother's side of the family from the German end of it. And my father's side is English, Irish, and you would never have guessed it, Scottish. That's better. Yes. Primarily, a lot of them in the seafaring areas, captains of steamships, whaling vessels. My great-grandfather on my father's mother's side was into silver engraving, and I'm named for him. His name was John Allen Fielding, and I'm Allen Fielding Burns. So I have some of his silver engravings here. So in the immediate family, like my father, my uncle, my brother, and so forth, engineers. My grandfather was an engineer, graduated Cornell, class of 1906. And they were into patent law, patent attorneys, and my father was a patent examiner in the government in Washington, D.C., where I was born. Born in D.C., raised in Arlington. When it was country, and I mean country, the home, the family's homestead I was in for the first few years of my life was known as Reserve Hill Farm, out in the country in Arlington, and it was where the Union troops were held in reserve during the Civil War. At that time, I used to ride my bicycle as a young person out to Great Falls through McLean, when McLean was a crossroads with a country store and a gas station. McLean, for those of you who know Northern Virginia, is a bit different now. You wouldn't dare take your bicycle out on the road. So I then went on to Cornell. My grandfather was Cornellian, my father attended Cornell, and my uncle attended Cornell. My brother went to Cornell, so it was expected. I went to Cornell, but I broke the mold, went into agriculture and agronomy, and with an emphasis in soils. One thing about Cornell, just like every other college at that time in the 50s, there was primarily male dominated. There was a 4-to-1 boy-girl ratio on campus. And I said, this is not good for the social life. So at that time, the girls' dorm served meals and gracious living and waitresses and all the rest of that kind of thing. So I took a job as pot boy in one of the girls' dormitories, a junior girls' dorm, where the ratio was 1 guy to 4 girls. That was great. Great for the social life. And by the end of my freshman year, I was dating a junior girl because of the junior girls' dorm. So I had a fast course in the social life of college at that point. And so in my junior year there, where I was still working, the girls kept changing. It was a junior dorm. My wife-to-be came to live in that dorm, Seanie Burns. That time, Seanie Payne, a nice girl from the farm. She came in from the western part of New York State in the Finger Lakes region. And by the end of my freshman year, or my junior year, I was dating her. At the big event at that period was when between my junior and senior years, I dropped her off after dinner one night. I was working at the Ag Experiment Station, driving back. About 11 o'clock, I fell asleep, road turned, and I didn't hit a tree head on at 50 miles an hour. This is before seat belts. I won't go into the gory details. It was a long recuperation, but I did take the steering column in that old Chevy and bent it upright. The only thing that was salvageable in the car was taken by my future father-in-law. It was a battery, so he could charge up his electric fence on the farm. So that was part of the whole story there. Anyway, during that period, I was 3 months in the hospital during the summer months, got to know all the student nurses before they went back to college. And in fact, I got to know them so well, they invited me to their farewell picnic at the end of the summer. It was a grand time. And so Steenie visited me every single day, except for the one day a farm girl could never miss, and that was the state fair. So she was off for one day. But in any event, she's been with me almost every day since. I was one term behind. So in my senior year, I was one term behind, and Steenie graduated in May or June. I had to continue in summer school. And the high point of my summer school stay was that then on the 15th of August, and I remember it's a Friday, I took my last final exam, jumped into the car, drove up to the farm where Steenie was, so I could go to the wedding rehearsal. And on Saturday afternoon, we got married, and we jumped in the car for a 2-week honeymoon, came back, loaded up the U-Haul trailer, and headed for Purdue, where I was accepted for graduate work. Spent 4 years at Purdue. She 4 years there, and I did my master's work in soil fertility, but then went on to soil chemistry, which was a nice move for my PhD. And that's where we had our first son. Because of my time in the soil chemical area and clay chemistry, I interviewed a number of oil companies at the end of my career there because they were very interested in my clay background and because of the drilling fluids, drilling muds they were using in their oil drilling operations. I went instead with Johns Manville, and I spent 9 years at Johns Manville in R&D on asbestos and related items in New Jersey. They moved, during that time, I had numbers of technical papers, like a US patent, and we had 2 more sons, adopted a daughter. We had 3 boys. We wanted a girl, so we adopted one. That was a fast way to handle that. During that time, Steenie started, directed, and taught at a preschool that she operated there. I was on the Township Planning Commission. I was elected to the school board, and so I was a pretty busy guy. And they, at the end of 9 years, at the beginning of the 70s, with a downturn in the economy, they moved their R&D to Denver. They laid me off, so I didn't go. And one of the things about that period was that the downturn was severe enough that the US government stepped in and with a National Science Foundation grant, 1-year grant to every federal facility in the country. And I took the one that was offered at Picatinny Arsenal. They wanted me because of my soil background, because we were at the peak of the Vietnam War. And the Army was going flat out in the munitions production and the various Army ammunition plants. One of them's here in Virginia, Radford Army Ammunition Plant. And they wanted me because the EPA had just been created, and the EPA was coming down on the Army and saying, clean up your act. They were polluting the air, the water, the soil. And I was in soil remediation with the nitrate operation there. Get rid of the nitrates from the munitions production. And so that lasted for, it was a 1-year grant, but at the end of 8 months, they put me on permanent staff, GS rating. But at the end of a year, I said, this is not my career, the worst of the military, government, and paperwork. So I looked around and took back into industry, a private chemical company in the Philadelphia area. Philadelphia company became PQ Corporation. I'm there, it was fairly small. Now it's a several $billion.
I'm still on my Zoom meeting. Yeah, they got in later. So can you give me another about 10 more minutes?
Put this down.
Sure.
You want me to wrap it up now?
Thank you.
No.
Okay. Well, in any event.
No, keep going, Alan.
Okay. I don't want to overrun it here. I'm moving along pretty fast.
No, Alan, look. We some guy caused the meeting to start late, so you're allowed extra time.
Well, in any event, I was there at Picatinny Arsenal 1 year, and I went to work for PQ Corporation in the Philadelphia area, outside of Philadelphia in Conshohocken. And I spent 20 years there, and in R&D, and moved into several years, 4 years in corporate planning. I was corporate planning manager, and then we joined up with a German firm, Degussa AG, a joint venture. And I got involved in marketing and so forth, made several trips to Germany and back. Back to R&D, and that was at the beginning of the 90s. And there was another downturn. I had to lay off 13 people in my R&D operation. I was, at that point, technical director of research and development. And so we had to lay off a lot of people. And I said, this is not my style of life, although I enjoyed it. I retired from them at the age of 57, but because I've been involved in a number of church and mission related activities, I went into mission and church renewal activity for the next 10 years. We raised our children there in the Philadelphia area through high school, all went on to college and have jobs. Sini, because we had moved from Jersey to Pennsylvania, started another preschool, directed and taught at it. And while I was there, I was on the local and county library boards. And so, but ultimately I built a beach home down here in Cape Charles. Won't go into the story of how we got there. But at any rate, we ended up down here in Cape Charles in the early 90s, where we built a beach home. It was burned to the ground by an arsonist. We rebuilt, and we moved here in 1994. I then left, I had left in the early 90s PQ after 20 years, went into the church renewal and international mission activities, I'd say for about 10 years, working from home. We did mission work, I did mission work around in the US as well as Puerto Rico, went on Northern Ireland a couple of times, Paraguay 3 times, India twice, New Zealand,
Wow.
Russia, and ended up that 10 years as vice president of operations for the missions agency down in Atlanta for 1 year. Came back here and to our home here, and actually moved here permanently in 1994. 2 years spent in consulting and that kind of thing. And then in 2009, I found that they were going to open a welcome center here at the Bay Bridge Tunnel. So having nothing else to do, I decided I'd go down there and apply for a part-time job. And through some interesting events, within 2 weeks, I was managing the place. And so for 10 years, I managed the Welcome Center. In fact, some of the folks here in Rotary were down there as staff people. I had over 20 people in the staff at one point. Bill Murphy was one of them. Bill, sorry you're not here to talk about it. But at any rate, there for, as I say, 10 years. And then in 2019, last year, well, 2 years ago, we sold our place on the beach and moved to Bay Creek. And a part of all that transition activity, as I'm slowing down, I think it's time I started at the Welcome Center of that new career back in 2009 when I was 73. I said, well, it's about time to back off just a bit. And so last year I retired with my wife. We have with 3 children now. One of our youngest son passed away about 3-4 years ago from mesothelioma. But by this time we had 8 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren now. All of the children were born-again Christians, and they all married born-again Christians, and all the grandchildren are Christians. Have a lot of people in churches and around the world in my family now. One of my children my son's a pastor. One of my grandsons is a pastor. My son is in Richmond. My grandson's out in Michigan. One of them is grandson's a Fellowship of Christian Athletes full-time representative. Have people involved in the church all over in our family, and so we have people in here in Virginia in the family, and in Pennsylvania, and Michigan, out in Tennessee, and we have a daughter in Saudi Arabia. So we're trying to infiltrate the entire world. We have, starting with Cindy and me, we now have 30 some in our family. Let's see if we can see this thing here. See that thing there? There you go. That's our family tree. So starting down here at the bottom with us, we've branched out, so to speak. It's 30 some of us, and we all are now, we're trying to infiltrate the world. And so here we have Team Burns. That's us. Okay. And so that basically wraps it up. A rapid rundown. I'm enjoying retirement. Getting into the genealogy thing just as a sideline. Last night I traced my lineage back to Patrick Henry. I'm his great grandson, direct line from the Fitzhughs. He comes down the Fitzhugh line on my mother's side, and I related to a lot of the Fitzhughs here on the Eastern Shore, and I'm establishing where it is we make connection. Fitzhughs and Tankards both. I mean, we have that both of them in our family. So I'm having a great time doing that. So back off. That was the faster version. We were 3 or 4 hours together, Bill. This was the 15-minute version.
Yeah, well, I kept asking you questions, if you remember.
I'd like to ask Alan a question.
Yeah.
When did you become interested in the choir?
In the choir?
In the choir. You are a member of the choir. You sing.
I'm a member. I've always enjoyed singing. We're talking about choir, singing choir, right?
Yeah, yes. Chorus, yeah.
Okay, I've been in church choirs ever since I was a young person. And my wife directed the church choir when we were first came down here for 10 years over in Capeville. And I've always sung baritone, really. I switch between tenor and bass depending upon what the range is. I've always sung. Now I'm part of a men's group that's a Christian men's group. We have church gigs primarily around the area. We had a whole spring itinerary lined up that we wiped out because of COVID-19. A friend of mine said that, the worst investment she ever made was a 2020 day planner. And so, it's absolutely blank, so so I became interested in when I grew up. I always sung in one way or another, and never done it professionally, but I've always enjoyed it. So,
other questions for Alan?
Alan, tremendous. I mean, I'm just so impressed. I learned so much from you. I talked with you about some of this a couple of times when we were meeting face to face, and you shared some of these details. But wow, this is phenomenal. And I have a mentor who parallels some of your early days in soil, all the soil research, and this guy also did animal husbandry and veterinarian. He did like 20,000 autopsies on animals and people to determine how the environment impacted those deaths and those diseases and things like that. So I'd love to get together with you at some point and just share some time with you and talk about some of this stuff, because there's a huge parallel. He's 81 and you're 82, 83. So that your ages are about the same. His work is in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. as a national treasure.
Yeah. Well, I've been more interested in the soils all along. My wife has been into the plant side, so she's enjoying the gardening down here.
Yes.
Go out and buy the fertilizer.
Awesome. Great.
Anything else for Alan?
Alan, your heritage kind of flip-flops mine. My mom was she was English, Irish, and Scottish, and my dad was the German side and
okay.
European. So we're just about flip-flopped on.
Okay, yeah. Well, my mother's side came to this country in the 1800s, and the German and the Dutch and the Van der Werken and Vandenbergs and all that sort of thing. My father's side, the Burnses, came earlier than that.
Again, that parallels my story too. My father's. It's actually my great-great-grandparents came from Germany back in the mid-1800s, but my mother's time goes all the way back to the Jamestown settlement.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding out all kinds of interesting things, like the Fitzhughs, for example, here on the shore. One of the Fitzhughs died in 1944, and he was very active in the area here as well as in Richmond as a delegate. But his father had a brother who had a daughter, so that the daughter and his son were cousins. I found out that they married each other, and first cousins, which is something you don't hear about very often. But and so I found them as a duo in 2 areas of my family tree, and I'm saying, what happened here? And I found indeed it's true. Yeah.
In a lot of cases, they don't know their cousins.
Yeah. Her name because it had, she was a son of a daughter of a son, a brother, had the last name Fitzhugh, just like he had a Fitzhugh. He was a Fitzhugh. So her name was Mary Macon Eyelet Fitzhugh. Sounds like you were sneezing.
Interesting stories.
Yeah, it's all kinds of interesting stuff. I've going for on and on in that area, as I found out, but now's not the time.
Well, Alan, the club is delighted you're amongst us. You are indeed a treasure. And we'll just hope that you have many, you and Cini, many more happy years.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed my time in Rotary. I didn't mention that it was while I was at the Welcome Center that I joined Rotary. And so I've been a member for about 8 years now. So
We need a big celebration with your first great-great-grandchild.
Yeah, right.
David has something to say.
Hey, Alan, have you visited Patrick Henry's home, Scotchtown, up in Hanover County?
I missed the first part of that, Dave.
Have you visited Patrick Henry's home, Scotchtown?
No.
In Hanover County?
No.
Oh my God.
You'll have to give me some background information on it. I'd like to do that.
Oh, it's a knockout. You got to see it. You'll love it.
Well, he was governor of Virginia, also. I'm sure he's been in this area. Yeah. Okay.
Well, Alan, thanks again for making what started off slowly a great meeting. And I would just ask anybody if they had 1 or 2 final things for the good of Rotary. If not, Diane, with respect to what we think, say, and do. 1, is it the truth?
The truth.
2, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it build goodwill and better friendship? 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And Stanley?
Will we have fun?
Oh, yeah.
Stanley, where can I get some of your bees? Your honey?
Bees?
Where can I get your honey?
I'm in MTC. I'm in Riggins up on 13 on the left-hand side heading north. I think it's next to Dee's Brothers.
Diggs Brothers.
Yeah. I'm next door to them. And also at Baines, the red
strawberry guy?
Yes, I'm in there also.
Good. So what's the brand name of your bee?
Machipongo Sweet Home.
Oh.
All right, enough selling, Stanley. We have to go now. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Take care,
Bye.
guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.